Capirotada, Mexico's answer to bread pudding. Hello everybody and welcome back to my kitchen. Now, one of my favorite dishes that they make in Mexico during Lent is called capirotada. We typically translate that as bread pudding in English, but it's not like our bread puddings at all because it doesn't have a custardy base. Instead, think about it as butter toasted bread that is cooked in this beautiful, rich, spiced raw sugar syrup, and then it's got nuts and dried fruit in it. All of that goes together to make a flavor that I absolutely love. So we're getting started here with the bread part of it, and I already cut up some bread and put it into the oven to dry out about half-inch-ish pieces there. Now I'm going to put them actually into a bowl and cover them with some bread, cover them with some butter, and then put them back into the oven to further toast. Now the butter has been melted here in the microwave. Easiest way to melt butter, I think. And so I'll drizzle this melted butter now all over this bread. Use a spoon to toss it around a little bit and make sure everything is evenly coated. And then I'm going to put it back out on the same rimmed baking sheet that I did my initial toasting in here. And then we'll go back into the oven, spread it out evenly so that it'll toast evenly. And in just a few minutes more in this oven at about 325, 50 degrees, something like that, we will toast those guys. Okay, now let's talk about that syrup that I was mentioning earlier. This is the raw sugar. It's called piloncillo in Mexico. The big cones you will find in a lot of Mexican grocery stores. They may look like this, but they may be tiny little cones. So you're going to need about 1.25 pounds of them. So you have to look on the packages and see what the weight of it is. Now, if you can't find piloncillo, my recommendation is to use brown sugar, but I would say brown sugar mixed with a little molasses because this has a much richer flavor than regular brown sugar does. You got to chop this stuff up. I'm going to just scoop this stuff that I've already chopped here into this water. I've got 3 cups of water here that I have brought to a simmer. So I'm just going to get that started like that. Bring up the temperature a little bit here. But I wanted to show you how you chop this stuff because lots of times people just balk at it. It's a hard cone of cane sugar. This is about as raw sugar as you could possibly get, but it's really hard to work with. So what I do is to put it into the microwave for 30 seconds for the big ones, much less time for the other ones. And that will heat it up on the inside and unstabilize the structure so that I can put my knife through it quite easily. It really won't be hot to the touch, so I can kind of pick it up. But now I can kind of roll my knife around on it and it'll cut fairly easily. Man, it is so hard to cut if you don't do that little bit of heating with it. Microwave is definitely the best way to go on that kind of heating. And it's just a rough chop. We're going to put all of that into this pot over here. And then we're going to add the spices to it. Spices are going to be Mexican cinnamon. I'm sure all of you know about Mexican cinnamon. It's not what we call cinnamon in the US. That is a very hard bark that is cassia bark. It's in the cinnamon family, but real cinnamon is what they use in Mexico. It is a very flaky thing and not hard at all. You can easily break the sticks up. So I'm going to put those in there. I've got some cloves, some whole cloves there that I will drop in here. And then not all capirotada is made with red wine, but because this is a dish that originated in Spain and then came over to Mexico, I like to go with the recipes that encourage you to either put a little bit of dry sherry into it, or sweet sherry would work too because it's a sweet syrup, or put red wine. Red wine is my favorite of those options there. We're going to let this simmer now for about 20 minutes or so until it sort of gets a consistency. All of that piloncillo will have melted into there. It'll come to a boil, and the consistency will be like a light syrup. While we're waiting for that to go, I'm going to soak some raisins. I'm using golden raisins here, but you could use the dark raisins as well. I'm going to soak them in a little bit of red wine. And then for nuts today, I'm going to use peanuts, toasted peanuts. But this is utterly delicious with pecans. The pine nuts are really, really good in there. I've done it sometimes with hazelnuts. There's just a plethora of things that you could choose. And if you're not a raisin fan, then chop up some other kinds of dried fruit. I think dried apricots are really good in this kind of a preparation, but so are cherries, or dried cranberries are good in it as well. But I would soak them in a little bit of red wine just to plump them up a little bit. So I'll meet you back here when the syrup is ready and we've got that buttery, beautifully toasted bread. The bread is completely crisp. If you eat some, it's got a nice buttery crunch to it. Our syrup now has that syrupy consistency. And what I'm noticing is that the bubbles that are forming on the surface here, they're kind of bigger and glossier than when it first came to a simmer. I'm going to grab a strainer here and strain this over the bread and stir that up to make sure that the bread is evenly coated. And we're going to let this sit for 15 minutes for all of the bread to absorb that luscious syrup. The syrup has completely been absorbed now into the bread here. I've got the macerated raisins to put in here. I'm not going to put all the red wine that is left in here. And then I've got the toasted nuts that are going to go in, and stir that all together. Now you'll read in a lot of recipes, if from Mexico, that the next thing that you would put in here is cheese, that like the queso fresco, fresh cheese, or you could put in queso añejo, the aged version of that same cheese. I don't like to put it in when it's baking because I think it oftentimes just gets hard there. So we're going to use that, but we're going to put it in when we come out of the oven with this. I'm going to fill these little ramekins. You could just do this in an 8x8 baking dish, kind of like what most people think of as a brownie pan. But I'm going to show you a pretty presentation of it, and something that would be appropriate maybe if you're making a nice dinner for people. And after I get these all filled up, I'm going to put them into the oven, but I'm going to raise the temperature a little bit to about 375 so that they get a little caramelized on the top. And they will bake for 15 minutes or so. You just want them to get a little crusty on the top, and then I'll show you a really pretty presentation for them. Okay. These are the way I like them to be. They're a little crusty on the top. I like that. I'm going to show you how I like to serve these as a very nice presentation here. So I'm going to put ice cream on there. You could do some whipped cream if you wanted to, but ice cream is always very, very welcome, I think, on this. So we'll put that right over the top there. And then I'm going to sprinkle the cheese on here. Now, this may seem very odd to you if you're one of those people that doesn't like to mix savory and sweet together, but I do. And if you put queso fresco on it, or even some goat cheese crumbles, it will take your mind in one direction. This is more classic in Mexico, and that's the queso añejo, or the aged version of that, which has a flavor that's a little bit like a Romano cheese or something like that. It's kind of a little bit pungent, but against that rich piloncillo syrup with the spices in it and everything, I find it's really delicious. So there you have it, the most favorite Lenten dessert, which is called Capirotada, with the nuts and the raisins in there, and that really beautiful syrup that just, it shoots its flavor through everything. I hope you enjoy it.